Is his choice for Secretary of State, but some Democrats and some Republicans objecting now to his ties to Russia. Are we going to head for a confirmation fight? It is very clear. This president values business expertise over government expertise, and some people don't like it. All right, all of this right now is the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ all hit record highs today. We are within sight right now of Dow 20K. We're staying on 20K watch as the Fed meets to consider interest rate hikes. I am Trish Regan. Welcome, everyone, to the Intelligence Report. Again, markets moving higher. We are off the highs of the session, but I'll tell you, look at that. Really within striking distance right now of 20K. You're looking at oil there, which is also higher, getting ready to close out the day near $53.02 a barrel. All of this as the president-elect taps former Texas Governor Rick Perry to be his energy secretary and eyes former rival Carly Fiorina for director of intelligence. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says he's leaving his business before the inauguration, and it's going to be run by his sons. He also says, quote, no new deals will be done while in office. So does that take the conflict of interest issue off the table? We'll discuss it. Also, whether or not his daughter, Ivanka, could be in line for an official role in his administration. We're on all of it. But first, I want to get out to Trump Tower, where we find our very own Colin McShane. And Colin, you got quite a parade of visitors there today, including, my goodness, the rapper Kanye West. Fill us in.
Yes, indeed. I don't know what to make of that. I can tell you, Trish, he seemed to be in a hurry, Kanye West, for whatever reason, when he arrived here at Trump Tower. He made it hightailed over to the elevator, and up he went, and then down he came after meeting with the president-elect. As to, what to read into that, I don't know. Mr. Trump said the two of them have been friends for years. Perhaps more significantly, Bill Gates was here not that long ago. We've been talking so much about big names in the world of technology coming here tomorrow, and they are, for this tech summit. But Mr. Gates got the one-on-one treatment and a chance to meet with Mr. Trump. On the way in, he didn't say much. On the way down, he did say this. Watch.
We had a good conversation about innovation, how it can help in health, education, impact of foreign aid and energy, and a wide-ranging conversation about the power of innovation. Thank you.
All right. Number of different topics, I guess innovation being the biggest one. News-wise, the two big developments that you talked about are right on. Number one has to be Tillerson, the pick to be Secretary of State, the ExxonMobil CEO. We had the tweet from Mr. Trump this morning saying the thing I like about Rex Tillerson is that he has vast experience in dealing successfully with all types of foreign governments. Now, in terms of Rick Perry as the Energy Department as a likely pick there, we've been told by sources that he is indeed the pick. Transition officials have told us that Mr. Trump's really impressed with his economic record in the state of Texas, a state that its economic growth was really driven by the energy sector. So big picture, that's kind of what's going on here. The transition team is quick to point out to us that they've been moving through this at a relatively quick pace with 10 cabinet positions already officially filled. They say that's ahead of the Obama 08 pace, when at this point 7 positions were filled. So with that, Trish, back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Connell. All right. For more, I'm joined right now by Republican strategist Mercedes Schlapp and Democratic strategist John Rowley. Good to see you guys. Mercedes, Trump's out there talking about Rex Tillerson and touting his business expertise, saying, this is a man who knows how to run a global enterprise. And I'll quote here. He says this is crucial to running a State Department, a successful State Department. His relationships with leaders all over the world are second to none. But you know what? The left has taken issue, and I'm sure John Rowley will as well, with one leader in particular and his relationship with him. It's Vladimir Putin. What can you say, Mercedes, right now to reassure those who worry that Tillerson is too close to Putin, that'll be okay?
Well, I think Tillerson will have to make his case to the Senate and basically explain about his relationship with Russia, particularly with Putin. With that being said, I think that what Tillerson brings to the table is the fact that he knows how the Russians think. He knows what their goal is in terms of what they want to achieve. So I think, Trish, for the most part, Tillerson, who is being praised by Condoleezza Rice, by Stephen Hadley, by former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, former Vice President Dick Cheney. These are individuals who speak very highly of Tillerson as being a tough negotiator, of someone who understands the complexity of the global problems, and also comes with it from being able to manage a very complex bureaucracy in Exxon.
No,
so I mean that in and of itself plays well in dealing with the bureaucracy.
I hear it's almost like he was running a small country there. I mean, Exxon, it was a lot of employees. You had to protect those employees all over the world, John Rowley. In other words, I think the hope is, there will be no Benghazi-type situations, because if an employee calls up and says, hey, look, I need extra protection here, Rex Tillerson is someone who knows how to do that already, having operated in so many, difficult parts of the world. Nonetheless, there is this concern about Vladimir Putin. I mean, could it be, John Rowley, however, that we're coming upon a new day, and maybe our relationship with Putin and with Russia will not be as challenged as it has been in the past?
Well, it's a new day. I mean, I think Bill Ayers will have to switch his party affiliation with all of the communist alliances the Republican Party is making. I mean, I think there are hundreds of people, if you wanted a corporate executive with an international scope that doesn't have the colossal conflicts of interest this person has. And I think this is a piñata that the Trump administration is going to have to deal with.
Yeah, but weren't you going to have a problem with anyone he picked, really and truly? I mean, isn't that part of the liberals' MO right now? I mean, I can't. Is there anyone you like that he's picked?
Or somebody else.
Okay,
so I mean, it's crazy.
Okay,
hang on, Mercedes, go ahead.
First of all,
hang on.
You want to talk about the coziness with communists? Let's talk about President Obama's relationship with the Castro dictator Raul Castro. No, let's be honest. And then since when has Democrats been hawkish on the issue of Russia? I don't think so, because God only knows that Secretary Kerry, unfortunately, could not even have a deal with Russia on the issue of Syria.
And John, I wouldn't laugh at what Mercedes saying about
address the cyber threats that Russia has brought in, has done. So I hate to say, I mean, the Democrats are the last ones to talk about being hawkish towards Russia. I don't want to hear it.
Well, and I wouldn't laugh at your comments there on Cuba, because that's absolutely true. He really cozied up to Cuba in a way that is just absolutely unprecedented. But I'm just saying, in other words, John, what we've done has not worked. Our international policy really has been pretty much in shambles for the last 8 years, and beyond that. I mean, you look at what happened in Iraq. We never should have gotten in, but we never should have gotten out. John, it's in a bad state. So shouldn't we be thinking about all of this a little bit differently? I mean, Vladimir Putin, who's been the enemy, maybe he's not our best friend, but maybe we need to work together on some issues, specifically when it comes to fighting ISIS.
The point is not working with him or not. It's that Trump has business dealings in Russia, and we don't know all of that because of income tax returns. Exxon has a stake in Russia, so it's the huge conflicts of interest that is just going to permeate his administration. I think this nomination is DOA. He may all of his others may sail through. This one, because of that, we've already got bipartisan strong opposition, not even to get into climate change and energy.
I have a feeling he might actually be able to get this one through. What's your verdict on it, Mercedes?
I really think that you got to go through the confirmation hearing. You have to have an opportunity for Tillerson to make his case. And I have to say one thing here with Tillerson is the fact that we clearly understand that Putin he's not someone we can trust. We've known this through decades of these administrations dealing with Putin. And obviously, Trump and Tillerson are going in there knowing that it is going to be a tough relationship to deal with, and you need a tough negotiator like a Tillerson and like a Trump.
And somebody, by the way, who's actually had to negotiate with him in the past and has had to be able to see through some of the muck out there. Anyway, John Mercedes, thank you so much. We got more to cover here. Thanks. A showdown may be coming between our future president and the Republican-led Congress. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, along with House Speaker Paul Ryan, are calling for investigations into potential Russian meddling in the elections. And they both said Trump's promised tax cuts may be too deep and need to be revenue neutral.
My preference on tax reform is that it be revenue neutral. On the infrastructure issue, it'll be interesting to see how this was put together. But I hope we will clearly avoid, and I'm confident we will, is $1 trillion stimulus. So we need to do this carefully.
All right, joining me right now is Trump economic advisor Steve Moore, also Steve Hayes, the editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Congratulations on that new job there, Steve. I'll start with Steve Moore here. What are McConnell and Ryan, in your view, missing? You are someone who has been a big proponent of tax cuts. They want it to be revenue neutral. What's it really going to look like in the end?
Well, Trish, it's not just that I want a tax cut. It's Donald Trump wants a tax cut. That's what he campaigned for. He campaigned saying, I'm going to give the American people a tax cut. So if it's revenue neutral, it's not a tax cut. One person gets a tax cut, another person gets a tax increase. Now, I happen to think, Trish, that if we did, this economic plan with this tax cut, I think you're going to get a lot of revenue from businesses that are going to come into the government, to the country. I think you're going to get a lot more people into the workforce, a lot more jobs in this country, which generates revenues. But I've never liked the idea of a revenue neutral tax plan. I think we ought to cut taxes because Americans are paying too much, and Donald Trump has said that many times to me as well.
Stephen Hayes, the thinking on that from the economist viewpoint is that you can grow overall GDP via these tax cuts. In other words, it may not be revenue neutral at the start, but the whole idea is to bring in more tax revenue by growth, as opposed to penalizing people, saying, okay, you made that much, now you're going to pay the government more. It's interesting in some ways, and this is JFK, right? JFK cut taxes. Back in those days, it was the conservatives who were saying, no, you got to watch spending. Is McConnell clinging to an old school of thought at a time when we need to do more to generate growth?
Well, let me just say how refreshing it is to be talking about how deep tax cuts are going to be after the last 8 years.
Here.
No, look, I think Steve makes a good argument, and as somebody who's been sort of an eager tax cutter, somebody who almost never met a tax cut I didn't like, I think he's right. That said, I do think it's important when you're talking about debt and deficits to be mindful of what we're seeing on the other side. Now, I would want to solve that problem by looking at serious entitlement reforms, which everybody knows are driving the debt. Paul Ryan, of course, has sort of pioneered a new approach to entitlements. Donald Trump has made clear that he's not much interested in reforming entitlements.
He really insisted on the campaign trail that he wasn't going to near that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one idea. Do you think Mitch McConnell will push for that as well? And what kind of opposition is he going to be met with, Steve Moore, given that Donald Trump said, look, we're not going to go near those things? Save that for another day.
Trump really did say, I'm not going to touch Social Security and Medicare. Now, he didn't say we're not going to deal with the fraud, because there's massive amounts of fraud in both of these programs in terms of erroneous payments to people who shouldn't be getting them, and we should clean that up. About $150 billion a year of erroneous payments. But, yeah, look, I'm a big believer that the president should do what he told the American people he would do. And what he said consistently to the American people, he's told me this many times, the top priority right now is growth, getting the economy moving, getting people back into jobs. And once you get that, Trish, you solve a lot of problems with growth. You bring the deficit down, you get the debt down, you get people into jobs, you reduce poverty, and then I think you could have a serious discussion about entitlements. But I'd say to my friend Steve, just one quick thing. Steve Hayes, you and I agree a lot. The problem with the entitlements is tell me one Democrat in Congress that wants to deal with entitlements seriously. Right. I can't think of one.
Yeah, no, there's not a whole lot of political will there on either side. But Stephen Hayes, what happens to Mitch McConnell if he continues to really throw this kind of opposition up about tax cuts, given, as Steve points out, this is what Donald Trump won on. This was part of the platform.
Well, look, I think that's one of the reasons that Donald Trump is going to have good relations with Congress, with Republicans in Congress. He's going to have to make that case to Mitch McConnell, make exactly the argument that Steve is suggesting he make, which is I ran on this, I won on this, this is what we ought to do, and these are my priorities. He's the President of the United States. He's shown an ability to make his case directly to the American people and to bring people along behind him. I think he ought to do that. I do think it would be a big mistake. I mean, Steve is right on the fraud, on the entitlement question, but the real problem, of course, is structural, and we need to be serious about addressing the structural problems with entitlements. I would certainly be open to sequencing it any way, just as long as we eventually have the entitlement discussion that we all know we need to have.
All right. Well, it's so good to see both you guys. And Stephen Hayes, congratulations, the new editor-in-chief at the the Weekly
Appreciate
Standard, taking over for Bill Kristol. Really exciting stuff. All right, I'll tell you what else is exciting right now. Here we are on 20K watch, up 117 points right now on the Dow. You see 19,913. There's a chance we could get there today. We've got all of this, plus that big Fed meeting that's happening tomorrow. We get a preview. What can you anticipate? Will interest rates really go up? And what is it going to mean for these markets? I'll see you right back here after this. All right, everyone, we get the Dow nearing 20,000. Take a look at this, 19,905. We're backing off the highs of the session, but nonetheless, still triple-digit gains. Could 20K happen in our hour? Could it happen this week? What is this rally all about? Is it all because of Trump? Joining me right now on set, our very own Charlie Gasparino, along with Steve Cortez from BGC Partners, who has been a Trump surrogate and a big advocate of his and his economic policies throughout. All right, so Charlie, do we get there this week?
Could
20K.
it happen in this hour? Probably not. Could it? Is it because of Trump? Yes. Could it happen this week? Yes. Definitely.
But not this hour? Come on.
Will it sell off after it happens? Probably. And long term, should you buy in the dip? And Steve and I were talking about this. I'll hand it over to you. Explain why. Explain the pitfalls of buying in the dip.
Well, no. I think you should, though. I agree with everything you just mentioned. We will get there. We're going to get there before Christmas for sure. Santa's bringing 20,000. I don't know if it's today, but Santa is going to put that under the tree for a lot of Americans, a lot of investors. I think the optimism right now, it's palpable. I mean, it's obvious to see in the market, but it's out there just in the streets. It's out there. When I talk to, and I live in Chicago in a pretty blue city, when I talk to business owners, many of whom did not at all support Donald Trump, when I talk to them, there's a refreshing optimism that's out there about hiring people, about investing in technology. So I think
because you feel like for the first time, the administration is actually on the side of business.
Unshackling.
They actually want to see this economy grow. Unshackle's a great way to put it.
I mean, I was very critical of Trump during the campaign. I mean, highly critical of a lot. I'm going to fix.
Yeah, I noticed, Charlie.
You noticed that. The one place where I supported him 2,000%, I should say, was on his economic plans. That, if you really believe in pro-growth policies, if you, squeeze the tax system down where you lower rates, you plug loopholes, you lessen regulation, you stop bashing business. This guy, you got to buy this market all day if he gets elected with a Republican Congress. The pitfalls, I think, and you know this as well as I do, does he match in actions his rhetoric on trade? I hope it's BS. And I think it is BS, but I hope it is, that he's not going to start a trade war with China. And
but you need a negotiation standpoint, right? I mean, you got to be threatening these trade barriers.
No,
threatening.
Listen, they could threaten us too. Remember, this is not a one-sided game. Be really careful with this stuff. I'm not saying you have to roll over.
I mean,
but Charlie,
you wonder if it's BS or if it's part of his shtick, right? I mean, if you're going to negotiate hard, you actually have to have a position where you're really negotiating.
And I think what's refreshing
about whose treasury bonds?
Yeah, they're our banker.
That actually means, ironically, we have them by the short hairs.
Well,
right?
Well, they don't want us.
That's the irony of large-scale indebtedness. But look, I think the main point.
That's a good point.
Is that
Steve.
No, there really is, right? In other words, if I owe you $10, I have a problem. If I owe you $10 million, you have a problem.
By the way, that was the Donald Trump approach with his economy, with his casinos back in the day. He knew the banks knew he owed them.
Right.
He owed the banks a lot of money.
So the banks needed
to keep him around the while.
Well, and China's in a similar position with us with debt. But here's, I think, the more important part, and this is why I think that will resonate with regular Americans, is that we have acted far too long with China, with Mexico. We've acted like we don't hold the strong cards, like we don't have the strong hand. Yeah. And we do. And when it comes to negotiations, whether it's security issues in the South China Sea, whether it's trade, whether it's a border with Mexico, we have to start acting like we're America and that we have the strongest hand in the world to play.
Let's be real clear here. Those are not policies that necessarily were at the heart of our economic issues. The heart of our economic issues is not free trade. Okay, we have problems with our economy because we have businesses that can't grow because they're facing massive regulations. Free trade is here, whether you like it or not. Carrier in 10 years is not going to be in Indiana. It's just not going to be there.
But you said something very important. You've got these regulations. You've got high taxes. Right. So in other words, if you're Carrier, why do you want to be here if you got all these regulations? Why do you want to be here if you've got onerous taxes?
Or you want somebody else to take Carrier's place because you're not going to be building air conditioners forever here. My two things. If you're an investor, I think you really have to worry about the trade rhetoric. It's more complicated than the Trump hotels when you start beating up on China all the time. And the other one I would say is the infrastructure stuff. There's good ways of doing it, but if he just goes out and blasts like $1 trillion worth of infrastructure spending, you're going to blow a hole in the deficit, and you're going to have interest rates spike.
We have to hope that there's going to be some accountability, and that his tweets about Boeing and Lockheed Martin, he means it, because same thing, when you start to spend big time in infrastructure, you need to make sure that the money is spent.
Why do you want him to meet? Why do you want him? Why do you want him beating up on companies that sign contracts?
Why, Charlie? Because multinational corporations have gotten, for decades, not just under this administration, just about whatever they want in Washington, D.C. They've been so effective at using K Street as their weapon, and often taking from the taxpayer.
Listen,
I don't have a president who has the taxpayers back.
I'm sure that they overcharge, but if you have evidence that they're screwing us, bring it to Congress so we can indict these people.
I gotta leave it there.
And there's no evidence.
I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Charlie and Steve, good to see you guys. We're going to be right back. All right, the New York Times has hired self-described hack Glenn Thrush to cover the White House. Now, Glenn Thrush, he may not exactly be a household name. You see him there. But you may remember, this is the guy, the Politico reporter who was badly exposed in that whole WikiLeaks email scandal. Here is his now infamous email to Clinton campaign chairperson John Podesta, in which he asked Podesta, an obviously biased guy, right? He's running the Clinton campaign, to look over an article that he wrote or he was about to publish. And in this, Mr. Thrush wrote, quote, "Because I have become a hack, I will send you the whole section that pertains to you." He went on to write, "Do not share or tell anyone I did this. Tell me if I effed something up." You see, even Mr. Thrush knew this was a total no-no. You never, as a journalist, you never, ever, ever send a source an article before it's published. I mean, this is like journalism 101. So either this guy was just too darn lazy to ask the factual questions that were relevant to his piece, or he's actually such a liberal that he wanted to do the bidding of the Clinton camp. Either way, not good. And now he's heading to the New York Times to cover the Trump administration. Joining me right now with his thoughts on all of it, the host of Media Buzz on Fox News, Howard Kurtz. Hey, Howie.
Hi, Trish.
What do you think? Is this the New York Times just doubling down on the whole liberal bias thing? By hiring a guy like this?
Well, I'll say this. Glenn Thrush actually is a good reporter, and it's not unheard of, and you kind of alluded to this, to check back with sources.
I'm going to stop you there, Howie, because a good reporter doesn't go, yes, you can go back and check. But
right.
You know what? You say, hey, the age of so-and-so at that time was this. By the way, you had, pink lemonade or yellow lemonade that day. I mean, these are facts, right? You ask them point by point. You don't ship off the entire article and say, hey, can you look at this? Let me know if I have anything factually wrong or if I effed it up, as he
I agree with
said.
you on that. I agree with you on that point. That is simply not done. Obviously, Thrush knew he shouldn't be doing it because he says you got to keep it quiet. Proclaimed himself to be a hack. And, the New York Times, which has hired a number of people from Politico, doesn't see this as in any way a complication or disqualifying, I guess. So I would pose this question. Imagine if the same reporter had been exposed through some sort of WikiLeaks dump as having gone to Donald Trump's campaign manager and said, don't tell anybody, I want to run this article by him, just a hack. Do we think the New York Times would not see a problem and hire that reporter?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And here you think about the New York Times, and they've made a big point, some of their editors anyway, of saying, look, we want to clean up our act. We don't think that our reporters should be as vocal as they are on Twitter. Here is Liz Spade saying, I consider it almost an unrecognized point of view that the Times has come from being in New York, being, a certain circle and seeing the world in a certain way, not being in touch with people who don't like them or don't live in cities who are the ones that elected Donald Trump to the presidency. They're just out of touch with that. And she's making the point that her reporters need to be more in touch with reality, and yet they go out and make this hire.
Yeah, that got a lot of attention from public editor Liz Spade because she also, and she repeated this on the air to Tucker Carlson, was spanking the Times for some of its political reporters who are very active on Twitter and who have said a lot of things that are not friendly to Donald Trump or snarky toward Donald Trump on Twitter. And so that does reinforce the notion that the Times, at least in its political reporting, doesn't have much interest in being fair to Trump. Now, you'll remember that Trump famously went to the New York Times after the election, had an hour sit down, But I continue to see in the Times and other media outlets an undercurrent of hostility, and I'm not worried about aggressive reporting. I think all presidents should be covered aggressively, but an undercover of hostility and skepticism toward President-elect Trump that you might not see toward President-elect Hillary Clinton as she won the election.
Hey, I'd say that's one way to put it. Howie, good to see you. Thank you so much, as always. Make sure you check out Howie's show, Media Buzz, on the Fox News Channel at 11 a.m. Eastern every Sunday. All right, you get the Dow and the S&P right now on a tear, hitting new records today as the Trump rally rolls on. Take a look, 19,909 on the Dow. You know, it's all happening as the Fed goes into its two-day meeting. The Fed is expected to raise interest rates tomorrow. But what is the Fed's guidance going to be about future rate hikes? Are we in a hiking environment? If so, what does it mean for the markets? What does it mean for your mortgage rate? What does it mean for our overall economy? We're on it. I'll see you right here. Okay, take a look, everyone. We are looking at another big rally here. The Dow trading in the green for the 7th day in a row, making its way towards 20,000. What are we up? 8.5%, if I remember Charlie Brady's note this morning correctly. 8.5% on the Dow since Donald Trump was elected president. The Dow, NASDAQ, S&P all hitting new highs today, just as the Fed begins its big two-day interest policy meeting. Investors are anticipating that the Fed is going to raise interest rates this week. But many on Wall Street still wonder what the central bank is planning for 2017. In other words, do they continue on with these interest rate hikes, and how fast do they do it? Our own Ashley Webster is here, along with Jeff Flock, who's joining us, and Countdown to the Closing Bell host Liz Clayman, who's there at the NYSE for part of this party. Liz, it could still happen. Hey, we got a few minutes left on the clock here before you take over. It could still happen in the 2. It could happen in the 3 o'clock hour, and it could certainly happen this week. But the expectation, I think, is at least it's going to happen before the end of the year.
One more big headline. Boom, this thing's going up. We're about 84 points away, 83 points away from, of course, the big moment of Dow 20,000. And I can't say the traders are vibrating here at the moment because they've seen this party before, and we haven't quite gotten in the door to dip into the punch bowl at the moment. But they are waiting. And what can I tell you, Trish? For lack of any negative news headlines, we've got another rally on our hands, and the Dow has hit a lifetime high. So we're seeing real strength here. Again, the Russell's lagging. Not the S&P, though. It's up 14 points. So this is a broad-based rally at the moment.
All right, 92 points away or so. Look, you know, Ashley, the big question, of course, is what happens once the Fed indicates that interest rates will be going up at a faster pace? I mean, can these levels hold on?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? We want to get from Janet Yellen tomorrow, what is, now that the economic landscape is changing under President-elect Donald Trump. I was thinking of old school.
That's okay.
You know, there's no legislation that's actually been introduced. It's all pie in the sky right now. We've been told what he wants to do, and the market's reacting. It all sounds wonderful.
Look at the 10-year, by the way, 2.5%.
Look
basically.
at that! Wow, up to 3.14%.
This is the 30-year.
I think the 30. I think what's going to happen is that the Fed is quickly going to realize it's out of sync with what the economic reality is right now. I really do. I can see that. Does that mean a faster pace of rate increases? Probably. It's still more, you know, where are we going to get tomorrow? 0.25%? We're still remarkably low.
But are they going to go every other meeting?
Well,
or are they going to go every meeting?
I think the market has priced in 2 hikes next year. We could be looking at 4 based on what we're seeing right now.
You know, the one amazing thing about it all, Jeff Flock, is that, you know, people kept saying, okay, we're going to get a hike. We're going to get it. I mean, we've gotten like 1, right, out of the hike, out of the Fed in the last 8 years or so. I mean, is this marking a real different time? What are you hearing there in the oil pits?
Well, oil pit and, of course, Fed Fund futures traded here as well, which kind of gives you a little bit of a heads up. But the oil traders, I mean, they got the bulls and the bears fighting it out today. Particularly, we closed up, I think, 15 cents, little down in the after hours. But you know, you got the oil bears saying OPEC may not be serious about this deal. They're going to cheat and all that sort of thing. But then you had the International Energy Agency saying today world oil demand is going to be up, and we're essentially going to get rid of the glut. So all things positive. And, of course, Rex Tillerson at stake, if that's the way it comes down, is not a bad thing if you're trading oil.
Mm-hmm. You know, what are people saying there on the floor, Liz? I mean, the interest rate hike happening and more on the way. And thus, does it affect market valuations?
Yeah. They truly believe, Trish, that we will see, no matter what happens there with the Federal Reserve, that we will see Dow 20,000 maybe by the end of Thursday's session. Now, could be before then, could be today. We just don't know. But people are saying, watch the U.S. dollar. It is stronger again today, just slightly against the major currencies of the world and the DXY. But what you end up starting to look at there is if the dollar takes a hit, does that help all the big multinational U.S.-based companies in the Dow 30 that tend to do business overseas? They like a weaker dollar. If that happens, we're off to the races.
Yeah, well,
that's a good point.
Interesting to watch all this stuff. Okay, thank you so much. We'll see you at the top of the hour, Liz Clayman. I can tell you, Democrats cannot accept this reality that Donald Trump won the election. 9 Democrats, 1 Republican elector led by the daughter of Nancy Pelosi. They're requesting a briefing on reports about Russia hacking and interfering in our election process before they cast their electoral votes on Monday. And you get Democrats clinging to this hope that somehow they'll reverse their vote. Now the Clinton campaign is actually backing this effort. You get the chairman of the whole campaign, John Podesta, out there writing, the bipartisan letter raises very grave issues involving our national security. Electors have a solemn responsibility under the Constitution, and we support their efforts to have their questions addressed. Joining me right now from the Washington Examiner is Hugo Gordon. Good to see you, Hugo.
Nice to be here.
It certainly seems like an effort right now to undermine Trump's victory. It seems as though the left is doing everything it possibly can to delegitimize it.
Exactly. I mean, there seems to me no question that they don't really expect that this is going to work and that somehow they're going to be able to stage a coup inside the Electoral College and that the electors are going to come out and vote to make Hillary Clinton the president. But the calculation is very easy. There's a really, really long shot that it'll work. And at the very worst, they can help delegitimize Donald Trump, make people think maybe there was something fishy going on.
I think they've actually been quite successful thus far in that. I mean, I've talked to members of the left, some very reasonable, pretty educated members of the left that somehow think that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin conspired together to shift this election in his favor and did so by manipulating actual votes, which I've said over and over again. My goodness, I mean, if the Russians are actually manipulating the votes, we got a real problem on our hands.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, the one place that they've actually done a recount in Wisconsin, Trump got more votes as a result of the recount. And, no, I mean, I think that the people are suggesting that, but I don't know that there's any truth in it. And it's very interesting that although the story about the CIA thinking that Russia was deliberately trying to help elect Trump, it's very interesting that the FBI does not endorse that decision. So we don't know what the evidence is. We know that Russian hacking has been known about for months. There are congressional investigations, and suddenly, a week before the Electoral College is going to cast its votes, it's suddenly become a bigger deal.
You know, Hugo, the reality is, even if Vladimir Putin and Russia, if they were trying to influence this election, at the end of the day, they weren't the ones telling her not to go to states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio to campaign. That was her own decision. In fact, her own husband, Bill Clinton, said, you better get out there. These voters matter. Hugo, she thought they didn't. It was millennials, it was women, it was minorities, and she was going to win on that grand notion, not on those blue-collar workers who typically had been her supporters in the Democratic Party.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, I think that in some ways this is going to be more damaging to the Democrats than it can possibly be to Donald Trump, who is going to go on and be president. Because what it'll do is persuade enough people amongst the Democrats that actually they really did win and that their strategy was fine, but it was all undermined by the Kremlin and bad cybersecurity. And they won't make the necessary changes to appeal to Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. You know, they'll continue to ignore and take those voters for granted. What they need to do, if they really want to win, is turn their attention to those people and win them back.
Yeah, no, you're giving them some good advice. They really clearly haven't been so willing to take it, but, you know.
Well, I apologize for that.
They got 4 years. All right, Hugo, good to see you. Thank you so much.
And you. Thanks.
Donald Trump choosing business expertise over government experience in his administration picks Exxon's Rex Tillerson for Secretary of State, Andy Putzer for Labor, Wilbur Ross for Commerce, Steve Mnuchin for Treasury, and possibly even Carly Fiorina for something. So what are these business leaders bringing to the table that politicians simply cannot? We're on that story right after this. All right, Donald Trump's newest cabinet choices. They are causing liberals everywhere to freak out as he continues to pack his cabinet with successful and wealthy businessmen and women. Today, Trump picking Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson for Secretary of State. And now we're hearing he's eyeing former rival and Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina for intelligence director. So what is it that these business leaders know that politicians don't? And what does Donald Trump know by picking them? Joining me right now is tech executive Larry Fishelson and the executive director of the U.S. Energy Association, also a friend of Rex Tillerson's, Barry Worthington. Barry, I'll start with you. I mean, you got everyone all up in arms right now about your friend, Rex Tillerson. They say he's too friendly with Russia and has no government experience. Why do you think your friend, Rex Tillerson, is a good choice for Secretary of State?
Well, good afternoon, and I understand happy birthday's in order today.
Aw, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Cat's out of the bag.
You know, the Secretary of State has to be able to do three very important things. First, he's got to manage a bureaucracy. Rex has managed ExxonMobil, so that gets clicked off. He's got to be diplomat in chief, and he's proven time and time again he's capable of that. And he has to implement the president's foreign strategy. And Rex has been implementing strategy for 40 years at ExxonMobil. You know, relative to Russia and President Putin, I think the notion that you have a Secretary of State that the president of the Russian Federation knows and respects and trusts is very valuable. I don't see where the downside is with this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but the liberals are saying, and we had one earlier on the show, John Rowley, who was very vocal about this. He just didn't like this idea because he said, you know, look, we have been at odds with Vladimir Putin for so long. Someone that has this relationship with him, friendship with him, that sort of, I guess, puts the traditional us at odds with Russia sphere into question. I mean, I kind of think, Barry, maybe it's time to do that, however. I mean, maybe the old strategy hasn't worked.
Well, it is time to try something new. And in terms of President Putin and Rex being great friends, I don't think they actually go to the baseball game together and drink beer. I think it's more a matter of they've dealt together on business matters. Putin respects Rex Tillerson. He knows him. He trusts him. And if we're going to have an improved relationship with Russia, I think those qualities in the Secretary of State are very, very important and very valuable.
You know, Larry, all of these people that he's looking towards have pretty substantial backgrounds, many in the business sphere. What is it that you think, Larry, people that come from the private sector can bring to the White House right now?
Well, the biggest thing the White House needs is creating jobs. So in the private sector, we know how to create jobs. We know how to go out there against the taxations and the regulations to create jobs. Now, the biggest thing that's going to happen here with the White House is if you get the repatriation down to 10% and bring the billions of dollars, trillions of dollars overseas back, and you go ahead and take the tax rate down to 15%, you're going to explode business. But you have to be able to know how to do that. You have to be able to know what, go do a P&L and make money for the businesses and continue to grow. So private enterprise goes ahead and makes money where the government business doesn't make money, doesn't create anything.
Yeah, no, it seems almost kind of refreshing, Larry. You know, and hey, I'm a business reporter, right? So I've talked to so many CEOs throughout and looked at government through the lens of business, and you know, they operate quite differently.
Here's the beautiful thing about business, and I've been a Trump supporter since the beginning. There's going to be a tech boom that we're going to see out there now, and there's a tech meeting coming up because you're talking about here private people coming in. Now, I believe a lot of the people in Silicon Valley went ahead and pulled the lever for Trump. I think a lot of it was personal. A lot of it was social issues.
And that's why the polls were so wrong, right?
Yeah,
I got to leave it there. I'm out of time. Larry, Barry, good to see you guys. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you for the birthday wishes. We're going to be right back with more intel after this. Dow 20K, could it happen? We're going to be talking about that. I will be a guest on Special Report with Bret Baier tonight on the Fox News Channel. So make sure you tune in at 6 p.m. We'll be previewing everything that could happen tomorrow with the Federal Reserve. In the meantime, 20K. Hey, there's still a little time left, and Liz Clayman's at the New York Stock Exchange.